Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Zoom. We're doing Newsline Live by Zoom because of the growing pandemic figures and the death numbers too. And Newsfirst, like everybody else, is trying to do what we can to try and stem the spread of this COVID-19 pandemic. Now then, our guest this evening is former Cabinet Minister, member of the SJB, Mr. Harin Fernando. Very good evening to you, Mr. Fernando.
Good evening, Faraz.
Now, I'd like to ask you, Harin, now, we had the government bring various items in and listed it on as an essential service. We saw the appointment of a former military man as the commissioner for essential services. Does this mean, by virtue of this appointment and the formulating of this commission, does it automatically follow that the government is admitting to a current food shortage or one shortage that is looming, that is around the corner?
It's quite evident and quite clear that there have been a food shortage for a while. There have been people going into issues of milk powder. We've seen about sugar. We've seen about rice. So I mean, it's not something that just popped up a couple of days ago. It has been brewing up for the past 3 to 4 months, or even more than that, I would say. So therefore, it is not just something that just came up recently, but it has been coming. And I think there is a massive food shortage, and they are expecting something worse to happen. So probably trying to get hold of it and have some control, which is better late than never.
Okay, but your party has described some aspects of this of the latest gazette that it is draconian. Why would it be draconian?
Because it should have been under not under the emergency law, but it should have been under special provision act of special commodities, which is what on essential services is what Honorable Sajid Premadas as well as the SJB's point of view is. So because when you know there is a militarization or a military sort of administration handling emergencies as well.
Are you all merely speculating or going by past experience? Is this a real possibility?
Both, I would say. Past as well as we can speculate of what's unfolding, the things that have been happening, people who are responsible in governing. I mean, when you have the senior administrative officers as for secretaries for ministries, whereas the former military men taking over as secretary. So you see you see the sequence of things that's happening, and I mean, it's alarming. It's alarming.
And do you believe that this government have the capacity to listen to what the other side of the flip side of a viewpoint is, like listen to the collective opposition, for example?
Well, I had to disagree. I think the cause of the main problem of all this has been not listening, has not been working with the Congress. I mean, it's just been very dictatorial type of, I mean, he believes in what is right, and he just believes with a few of people of his own friends and decides upon the country, whereas the experts would have a different opinion. The different political parties might have a different opinion, but I would say, unfortunately for the country, this has not been the case in Sri Lanka, and he has been purely depending himself with few people around him and on his roundtable conferences that he has who agrees, and they have become definite yes, no, sir men. So you do not get the right input or the output when discussing on critical matters and that's relevant to the country, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's the cost of living. You need to get the experts, leaving the political differences aside, and have the political as well as the professionals in one table, because we are in a crisis that we've had never faced in the past. I would not say, I mean, for the 70 years of the past after independence, this is one of the crucial, most difficult times that we are in, with 10,000 people dying and so many people. The dollar is going up, the rupee is crashing, no commodities, children have not gone to school for 2 years, health sector is in complete disarray. So this is the time you need to set aside your political differences and just sit in one table and just look at the country first.
Harin Fernando, how satisfied are you as a citizen of Sri Lanka, as a politician, and maybe even from your standpoint as a member of the opposition? How do you view the government's handling of the battle against COVID-19? How do you view that?
Well, if you ask me directly, I would say it is the delays and the lack of conviction of science over myth. We say vidya and mithya. Mithya is where you believe in different high powers, whereas the science was not considered. So I think that was one of the key factors of our downfall, I would say. I mean, not ordering the stuff at the right time, at the right place. I mean, not forecasting ourselves, going in for different sort of things. So I would have to blame the government for their lack of foreseeing the particular crucial issue that we might face in the future. So I mean, had we ordered the injections, had we had a plan of distributing it properly among the people, I don't think we would have had to face such a situation. And also the lockdowns, had we managed the lockdown properly, I mean, did we take it easy? So I mean, the last April we saw lots of people going about in Sri Lanka here, having trips, having the car races, everything was open. Not that we were vaccinated at that point. So did the government misjudge it or took it lightly, and the country was open? We were doing trials. We see very powerful ministers saying, you know, we did some trials by giving water to some people, sanitizing. I mean, these are the stories very responsible people of the government was stating. So therefore, we clearly see that there is a bit of a problem.
And can we move on to this whole issue about the price of sugar? Now, if you remember before, the government reduced the taxes by 49 rupees and 75 cents and ensured that the tax was just 25 cents. And people were allowed to import and so on and so forth. Why is it then that sugar is selling so much higher, even through the Satosa outlets?
Well, these are the arguments that we've been speaking in Parliament for quite some time. I remember the first document, I think it was a very fearless journalist who wrote this up, and I found this article, and it was in January that I stated in Parliament. I take the responsibility that I was the first to expose in Parliament that there were 50,000 metric tons of sugar that has been hidden inside certain warehouses in Sri Lanka. And I remember then Andrew Kumar JP took it off after about 3 or 4 days and gave the particular names itself and said where exactly the stock was and what was their game plan and how were they making money. Now we see, I saw a professor from Peradeniya say the entire People's Bank profit for a year has been shared by 2 people within this short period of time, which is a massive amount of money. So these are things that was in question at that time. So clearly, it was. I mean, we can doubt, or we can feel that was it helping one of his friends who has helped him back at his election. So these are quite possible. I mean, you scratch my back, I scratch your back, sort of a thing. So this could be possible.
If this was in a SJB or in a UNP government, who would have making the money then?
I'm sure there would have been some people who would have been helping the top people. I mean, as a youngster, I would always say the 70 years of our past has these kind of issues that has happened in politics, and this is a good learning lesson for everybody. I mean, people are now disgusted about politicians and do not trust any politician. But this is an ideal time for us to come together as a country. I mean, this is something I said on a press briefing today. I see myself. I fear living in this country or my children being raised in this country. Therefore, we need our politicians to set aside the political differences. And this is an ideal time. If I was a president, I would say it's an ideal time to get all parties to represent, sit down and make the plans, because then everybody's represented. And I mean, having people like JVP, the transparency would be there. Nobody would be able to make money. I mean, and there should be sacrifices made by the politicians itself. You convince the public to also give back to the country. So that is quite possible if a proper strong leader who's willing to sit down and accept his mistakes, but still have time to correct it, because the country comes first before their political parties, or more importantly, their family.
Well, that's interesting what you say, and to me the most interesting part of that is when you started off by saying, if I was the president. Therefore, we're indicating to me about your future aspirations. When will you be making a pitch for the presidency?
Not at all, not at all. I mean, you could say that too, because you could see yourself in this situation. So, I mean, you're a journalist. You would say, I mean, if I was the president, I wouldn't have done that. So I'm sitting here all by myself, but with my dogs, and I'll say, if I was the president, this is how I would have done it. So when you really look at it, a layman would do a better job. Sometimes you expect a person that you bring from outside because he's so promoted by media. I mean, it's quite fake. And you give a fake personality to a person and make him people on a table who are professional, who are politically knowledgeable, on one table. So every sector is represented, not just my sector or who I believe in. So therefore, I think that's how I see the way forward for Sri Lanka. My biggest fear is, for 2 years, the school structure has not really worked. Children have not gone to school. A notorious guy like me, not going to school for 2 years and having to go to school afterwards, would be chaos. I'm telling you. And I fear, because I have 2 kids, and I see the future generation, how they will grow, is a bit of a problem. That will become a social problem. You need to realize lots of factors, not only surrounding the current situation, but the future as well. The health sector, how do we move forward? How do we want to see our health moving forward? How do we face a crisis situation like this? These things can always happen. So a policy, a framework, a country, a framework that won't change just because the political parties change, but a framework for a country for 10 years is a must at the moment, because I'm really fearing about this. The 3 million odd children who goes to school, I don't think more than 300,000 or 400,000 would have had access to online education. Where are we for the last 2 years? I mean, I've got a message from a young boy from a very good school in Kandy expressing how he fears. He's a science stream student who's sitting for A-levels. And he says they're supposed to have 6 mock exams. They've had only 1 exam before facing their A-levels. Doesn't know how they're going to face a practical. Practical depends on their marks. They have no assurance of what's going to happen. And these are students who are going to come into society next year. Just imagine the gravity of that situation and the gravity of our workforce and how this will all roll out. So these are things that I don't see the government has any plan or have discussed anything about it. So it's merely not just facing the situation right now. It's about how we space ourselves out on education in the next 2 years, the 4 years, the 5 years. How do we get the economy back? And I strongly believe we need to stop the debts first. You know, it's paramount. I would say an economy, the dollar, all these we can look at it further now later on. But saving lives should be our priority, number 1 priority. Saving lives. If I die, there would be nobody coming and feeding my 2 kids or family, and that's the end of their family. So how many families like that would be around who has not sorted themselves out? And it's critical. I mean, even for an organization, your boss, the head, something happens to him. How do you move on? I mean that whole structure has to be made. But if it is not, if it is a sudden death, how do you come back? How do you process that whole the business? So I would say saving lives should come first right now, and we should. Even if we have to lock down for more than another month, we should do that. Make sure everybody's vaccinated. We were late in our vaccinating. And how do we sort our boosters out? Because the antibodies could go down again. And if the antibodies go down, are we prepared for the 5th wave or the 6th wave? What is our solution? So the COVID has taught us a lesson that it is not going to end very easily. It's not just one jab. It's not just going to go away. A party that is coming to govern will have to go through this daily, and it's going to be a process.
And on that note, Harin Fernando, let's go for a short break and let's take a peek at this evening's headlines from the Newsfirst Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. Our guest this evening is the former Cabinet Minister and former Chief Minister as well, Mr. Harin Fernando. Remember, he's the person who started the crumble of the Rajapaksa administration way back then. We remember, we hope you do. He's right here with us, Mr. Harin Fernando. Mr. Fernando, now then, you know, you were saying about all, what you've said all this time. I'd like to ask you, do you regret that you were unable to fully cover Sri Lanka with data signals? Because, you know, nowadays you have children who are doing a lot of online studying, and there is a lot of claim on the availability of the data. And so in some areas, we have almost infamously shown children studying from the tops of trees. So is this one of your lasting regrets?
Well, yes, I think I saw this. I mean, and I have to assess my Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe, then the Prime Minister, was very supportive towards my claim of what I wanted to give on this education to everyone through technology and having devices. And he was quickly, he understood it, he grasped it, because what happened was I went on a study tour, not by local ministry money, but on a study tour that was sponsored by Microsoft. And I saw it in USA, in Seattle, Washington, into the Google. I saw all of this and was able to find a Sri Lankan who connected us with all these kind of people, the right people. But unfortunately, then government, the president, and a few who were on the TRC were not favorable for this particular project. But I still see a light into the tunnel. I see Namal Rajapaksa. I've spoken to him personally about it, and I see the president heading the digital initiative. And for me, what happened was I was the youngest cabinet minister then. And for me to push something through inside that cabinet, a government that we brought in, was very difficult because everybody had an opinion and just shut me down. And whereas I said this in Parliament, and do the syllabuses on television daily. I mean, that would be one more way of going through this. But what happens is, what happens in online education is that at least the teacher gets interacting with the student directly and can follow up on what the student is doing. But at least for now, something like this, the government should have done long time back, I would say, because lots of kids are avoiding studying, and I can see that unless they are being pushed and have an online sort of thing to sort themselves out. But what I see is lots of parents can't afford it. Lots of parents can't afford the devices, the data, etc. So there's quite a serious situation right now we're facing.
Thank you, Harin Fernando. Now then, the people are clearly affected by the economy, the lack of opportunity, the lack of money. We have a lockdown that isn't quite a lockdown. Do we need a properly implemented lockdown? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm glad that there's a lockdown, at least to this extent at the moment. I was more worried because my whole point was, if they don't lock down, let's lock down ourselves, which was my point of being careful or be looking after ourselves, because that's important at the moment. And but having said that, a lockdown should be a bit more strict. But I'm still, to be really honest, this is much better than being open and having public transport and having people on visiting public places. So at least this lockdown is somewhat better, but certain more restrictions should fall into place just to protect. I think 1 more month, make sure that we have both doses given to most people, and then also while doing that, plan about the booster shots as well. Buy them, get them from somewhere. And what is crucial is for every citizen to have access to antigen tests, have it at your home at a cost that you can afford. And this is also something that I raised in Parliament the first time, because I saw, while watching my Facebook, I saw 200,000 antigen being bought to Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan Airlines on their Facebook, mentioning a company and saying, thank you for bringing this down. So, I mean, I was curious to see how could 200,000 come on a chartered flight, and that's on a Facebook. And I went on to media, I went in Parliament, I questioned and said, how the hell did this happen? Where is the tender? Who gave authority to get it? And still, you have only one player bringing antigen kits to Sri Lanka. Whereas if you have different people bringing antigen kits, the price would be much lower. I mean, now it's a monopoly. And when you have a monopoly for the last 1.5 years from the day of COVID, imagine the amount of money that is being made just like the sugar. So these are mafias.
Well, Mr. Fernando, you know, the last time you spoke so sort of openly, you were under some form of investigation for a while. Are you not afraid of speaking your mind?
Well, I can see something more coming again at my way very soon, because I see a young boy who did a press recently about the Easter bombing going in for the 9th day consecutively to CID to be questioned. So I'm sure they are trying to find some sort of connection whether these kind of revelations are because I have been pushing them to do so. So I haven't, but in their own details. But I'm sure, one of us will, few of us will be inside for a while, and that will not be able to be stopped when when the government is really losing their marbles. I would say, sorry to say that, they would go behind people and they will try to shut them down. But I'm sure somebody else will take over and do it and talk the truth.
Well, you know, we hope that it won't happen, but that's not the way it should happen. But what do you believe? Do you believe that this government really cares tuppence about its international image, especially when they're so engrossed with trying to cope with matters local? What do you think?
Well, I think they've really failed the part of their foreign diplomacy, and this is one of the reasons where they have changed their foreign minister and changed to the old Carter back and replacing Dinesh Gunawardena with G.L. Pires. So probably that clearly shows that their foreign policy have failed and they are not being treated well by the foreign governments. So I do not think they have a clue other than dealing with China, how diplomatic relationships should be handled and how people could come in favor of us and supporting us at a time of crisis. This is one of the reasons we go to lower known countries like Bangladesh for funding. And this clearly shows that we have got our diplomatic relationships wrong and we're going to the wrong places. So it's unfortunate. As I said again, the way out of this is standing together as one. All political parties, like I said once in Sudan, this happened. Countries came together, they bailed them out. So we as a country have to show a lot of maturity, a lot of transparency, human rights, value for people's lives, all these matters. And this is where I think Mangala Samaravira, I really need to mention him. That's the biggest loss of the country right now, I would say, because Mangala's point of view is absolutely believed by people. Equality for everyone, for everybody, whether they're religion, caste, creed, did not matter. Everybody should have had access to everything. And that's a kind of a principle the world would like to see us do. And not just be, we are the people, we are the family. That culture would not work with the world and a more civilized world, I would say.
So what sounds better? We are the Rajapaksas or we are Sri Lanka?
For me, we are Sri Lanka. But I see where we are going wrong is there is one family who thinks we are the Rajapaksas. And I saw a beautiful cartoon recently. The Raja is the Rajapaksas, and the others are just coming behind them, tagging along. That's only the ones who have the Satake are the ones who are the government, but the others, the rest of them are just just piggybacking, and some ministers just trying to jump onto it, just trying to hold on to it. So, which is actually the case. And it's just one family being the government or the country. And the rest of all of us are just following them. So that should not be the case.
And do you see a situation that this government will actually last its full term?
Hard to imagine. With the looks of it, I don't see them going the distance. They will have internal a lot of issues. Financially, I would not think if we continue like this, the next 3 months will be very critical, and the government would not be able to face it alone. They will need people from the opposition supporting them, standing together, having a common consensus, using people like Harin Fernando, Harsha Sajid Premdas has been always a brilliant guy who has always spoken about these vaccines, foreseeing what will happen to Sri Lanka, asking them to buy it. I mean, they mocked him in Parliament, simply mocked him when he was saying it. And if you look at 1990, 1990, the Harsha's the emergency service, that has saved many lives in Sri Lanka. So there are some experts that you can use. I would love to this whole fray, because this guy is brilliant to make sure that in Sri Lanka, for them to believe in a government, we need all of them together. That's the way I see. So if this government would not work like a bull in a china shop and be more pragmatic, they would do that. But it's highly unlikely, because I saw a minister today blaming this whole issue on the opposition for having protest, and that's why this whole pandemic blew up, and that's what they were saying. But I would take responsibility. The few protests that we did as an SJB, it was only the SJB members of parliament did it on our own. We took into the street, we took our holdings, we were alone, we never asked our party supporters to come. But this is all what they're talking about, is about the fertilizer and the education protests that's happened. That's nothing to do with us. It was people who voted for them. They are uprising because the government was not listening to them. They had no other alternative. They had to live, and they came out to the street. So it's all the responsibility of the government. So I don't want to see this government passing the ball at a time like this to different political parties, but at least to stop it now and coming to terms and face reality and get this going, because we need the country first, not the family first. We need the country first.
Well, those are interesting thoughts, Harin Fernando. But at the end of the day, with these numbers going up and the death toll going up, I am forced to ask the question, borrowing from a little saying that was coined by Mr. Sajid Premadasa. Harin Fernando, does it not matter that Sri Lankan lives matter?
Absolutely. Sri Lankan lives should matter first. As I said again and again, we need to protect lives. We need to make sure people live. That should be our number one priority. Economy is crashing the world, but we can come back. We can work it through. We need to save lives. Lives matters. The country, Sri Lankan lives matter, and that should be our priority.
Well, Harin Fernando, thank you very much for your time on Newsline Zoom. We really appreciate your time, your thought process, and we hope and pray that you will keep safe, not only from COVID, but from other matters too. On that note, that's all it was from Newsline Zoom this evening. Take care, have a wonderful evening ahead of you, and as always, God bless you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.